Welcome to the CEN Show, a platform where we learn from the world community. This evening, I am your host, Roski Mascani, and we have here on the panel this evening, we have Professor Amin Ra, we have Linda Shorter, we have Brother E, and we have a first-time visitor, Stephanie Williams. And tonight, we have a guest host. And her name is Dr. Shari Randolph, and she's going to take over for a little while and do what she does. So welcome, Dr. Shari Randolph. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I believe the conversation is very important. I believe it's very timely as well as we celebrate the Day of the Dead. And tonight I would like to speak the name of Tyisha Miller and recognize her as an ancestor and part of the catalyst for this conversation. Tonight I have a special guest, and it's Rickerby Hinds. I would like to give a short bio, and then I would like him to pick up on his own because his bio is very extensive, and I believe he has a lot to share with us this evening. Rickerby Hinds is one of the pioneers of hip-hop theater who has the unique ability to challenge conventional notions of the stage while taking advantage of its history and traditions. A native of Honduras who immigrated to South Central Los Angeles at the age of 13. His work draws on his multifaceted background to create theater and is simultaneously challenging, compelling, and entertaining. Please welcome Rickerby Hinds.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Randolph. It's always awkward listening to one's bio and some of the things included in there. But first of all, I'm so appreciative to be a guest with you on the show, and I'll just add a couple of other things about my background. I am a playwright, so whenever I'm asked what it is that I do, I always begin with playwriting because that's the foundation for what I do. I'm also a professor at the University of California, Riverside, in the Department of Theater, Film, and Digital Production. I've been there for a couple of decades now. And my writing usually centers around issues dealing with our African-American family, and it travels the gamut. We've been talking a little bit before we went on about the film My Name is Maisha, which is based on the shooting of Tyisha Miller back in 1998. And that shooting prompted my writing of the play Dreamscape. And I also want to connect and acknowledge the Black Voice News, which is a newspaper, African-American newspaper in Riverside that was being published by my in-laws and currently being published by my wife, who decided to not let the story go. And because of that, the Tyisha Miller incident really became a nationally known incident, and there were demonstrations and other things that happened around that particular shooting.
And can you explain to the audience how they did not let the story go? Because it was something that happened over a course of time that kept the story alive. And
Yes.
Right in this part of the interview, I'm asking you, what's the story? How was that kept alive until it became Dreamscape, that became a global phenomenon?
Yes. So in December 1998, a sister named Tyisha Miller was shot while sitting in her aunt's car, at a gas station in Riverside. She was passed out. They believe she was having a type of seizure, perhaps, but her family actually had called for support, called for an ambulance. And when the ambulance came, so did 4 police officers. And 7 minutes later, she was shot 12 times. And so this incident was something that my in-laws decided they were going to say something about it every week and this lasted for approximately 2 years, where the front page of the Black Voice News addressed some incident, something having to do with this shooting and the relationship between the African American community and law enforcement. And as a result of that, my mother-in-law kept saying to me, you know, you should write a play about this. You should say something about this. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while, but eventually I wrote the play Dreamscape. Part of the writing of the play was also because these things continue to happen in different places. We lived. I moved to Cincinnati that same year in 1998. My wife had a position at the University of Cincinnati, and in Cincinnati there were incidents where young Black men were being killed at a significant rate. And so seeing these things continue to happen in different communities, I decided, okay, you know, I'm going to try to tell this story. I'm going to try to write this play. And my concern, I had two concerns. One, I did not want to, I didn't want it to seem like I was capitalizing on something so horrific, one. And two, I really didn't think I had the ability to tell the story in the way it deserved to be told. And so eventually I found a way to tell the story and to turn it into a stage play. And eventually that play became the movie My Name is Maisha.
Yes. And so what changed for you?
Part of it, the change really was the frustration of these things not being addressed. Part of it was me feeling the obligation as an artist to say something about this particular relationship with the Black community. I had written plays before Dreamscape that dealt with, you know, different aspects of racism, both historically and currently in the country. And so I just felt this obligation. I didn't feel like I could continue writing plays or doing the things that I was doing at the time without really addressing this issue that continued to take place. And so, you know, obviously, as we've come so many years since Tyisha Miller, and, you know, we've had incidents that have gone even further than this, I feel like, you know, to some degree, I've done something to contribute to this conversation and hopefully to help move things in a more viable, livable position for our folks.
When I look at the story and the movie, I think of something that's like in case that we can use in the future. And people say we have to tell our own stories. And in that sense, the African proverb, when the lion learns to write.
Yes.
Then, and I was thinking to call you a lion tonight because the story is of ordinary people, an ordinary family, and something dramatically changes the lives of the people in the story. And it's this trauma. And I just kept feeling how ordinary it was. It was Christmas time. It was Kwanzaa,
yes.
The Kwanzaa event of the family, and how ordinary that was. And then extraordinary things happen. And what you have done is told an extraordinary story. And in your bio, it says that you were one of the pioneers of hip hop theater. Why was this the genre that you chose to use?
So two things. One, I love the fact that you brought up this saying, right? Until the lion learns to write, the hunter will always be the hero. And for me, that's it. I don't even remember when I heard that saying, but it's something that has stuck with me as a writer. You know, since I began writing, really understanding that the person who gets to tell the story is the person who has the power to define who is hero and who is not a hero. So I just wanted I appreciate that so much. As far as writing in this genre, when I started writing plays, I'm old enough that I came up during that first incarnation of hip hop culture. So I moved to the U.S. in 1977, and so for me, it was not only being a part of the evolution of this form of entertainment and storytelling and rhyming and movement, but it was also a time when I had to observe my cousins and my classmates to really understand what it meant to be a 13-year-old Black male in Los Angeles. You know, I grew up off Crenshaw and Florence, so I had to understand what that meant. And so those observations, I believe, were the beginnings of me becoming a playwright. And because hip hop culture was evolving and emerging at the same time, the way I told stories used the elements that I was not only familiar with, but that I felt comfortable with as far as a storyteller. August Wilson would say that he wrote in the rhythms of the blues, because
Yes.
that's what was in his bones. For me, you know, there are other elements that are in my bones. Not only hip hop culture, but I grew up in the church, so most of my plays have some elements of gospel, have some elements of that church presence. Whether it's you know, the way a sermon is delivered, whether it's the way a choir accompanies the pastor during altar call, whether it's, you know, I used to sing in the choir. I remember the joke they say, you know, I sang solo, right? I sang solo that you couldn't hear me. But I you know, I sang in some choirs. So I understand the power of that space. And so when I began writing, I included hip hop elements as a natural way of storytelling. But the other thing was, I was not a theater major as an undergraduate. You know, my theatrical background was minimal at best. I had been in a play in high school. And so when I was working on my plays, my actors were my friends. And so essentially for me to convince my friends to memorize their lines and to show up for rehearsal, the prospect of being able to rhyme on stage or to break dance or to do something that was contemporary to them and to myself was also part of my consciousness as far as my writing and how I told stories. But the other part of being, you know, at the beginning of hip hop culture is I always saw and I always appreciated those storytelling elements that were present during that early time. I appreciated the knowledge and consciousness that was a part of that generation. And so for me, you know, when I was on campus at UCR, we were, you know, we were bringing people, speakers to campus like Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing and Dr. Ajra Kwesi and, you know, Dr. Ben, and we were gaining knowledge and learning these things. And so for me, it was a matter of combining those things. How do I take these elements, right? The founding elements of hip hop culture, MC and breakdance and graffiti, DJ and knowledge. How do I take those 5 founding elements and use those as storytelling tools so that I could tell any story? The stories that I tell aren't necessarily about hip hop. You know, Dreamscape is not a play about hip hop. It uses those elements as the means of telling the story. Same thing with Black Box, where there are elements of hip hop in Black Box, but Black Box really, if you see the play, this is Black Box is based on the life of Henry Box Brown, who shipped himself to freedom in 1849 in a box. And so
Yes.
I use that is the story, and that story uses overtly more elements of gospel, more elements of movement and sound, but nothing that one would immediately identify as, oh, this is a hip hop element. But for me, the way I think about a story when I'm looking at the stage, I think of movement. I think of graffiti as a visual element. I think of MCing as the lyrics, the dialogue. So my dialogue has to be as interesting as De La Soul's rhymes because that's what I came up with, right? So that's how hip hop culture manifests itself in my work, both overtly and covertly.
Well, I love that. And I want to go back to you mentioning August Wilson. He was a self-taught writer. So, and blues was part of the era that he grew up in. And you mentioned different speakers that were at UCR. And I want to acknowledge that Professor Amon Ra is one of the producers of this show tonight, and he's on with us. And I appreciate his presence here and the opportunity for us to have this conversation. I wanted to ask you, you weren't a theater person in undergrad, and you ended up with an MFA from UCLA. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I started writing plays when I was at UCR, and as a young writer, I had a lot of misconceptions about what it meant to be a writer. One of those misconceptions was I didn't believe in rewriting. So I believe that the muse came to you, it gave you brilliance, you put that brilliance on page, and you left it alone. And so I had written 4 plays prior to, this was, I think it was 1993, and I took a class with a professor. It was a play reading class, so we were just reading plays. And this professor asked me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a playwright, because somewhere I had heard that you tell people what it is that you want to do, even if you're not making a living doing that.
They get into existence.
Exactly. And so I said, I'm a playwright. And he said, of course, do you have something I can read? And I gave him a play of mine called Arlo's Secret, which dealt with sexual abuse of a young lady. And he read the play.
Because I'm turning off this big light.
He gave me a page of notes of things that I needed to rewrite. And I was reluctant to, at least. I was, very adamant that this play was the way it was supposed to be, because my friends had told me it was good and my family had told me it was good. So it must be good. And so he said, listen, if you take this play and you make these changes, and one of the changes was actually getting rid of one of my characters, who was a funny character, but was not serving the plot. It was a piece of delivery person. And so I reluctantly, after going and asking someone else for feedback, another professor who was an African-American professor, I said, listen, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm writing from an Afrocentric point of view, and in Afrocentrism, there is no I, there's only we, and therefore I can't have a protagonist, because a single protagonist goes against those things. And I was just talking a lot of stuff because I didn't want to do the work, which is what I encounter a lot with my students. They don't want to do the work, so you spend more time making an excuse for not putting in the work than actually doing it. I reluctantly did the rewrites. He put the play in a play festival at UCR. And after the reading of the play, a woman came up to me and said, we'd love to have you at UCLA. I had no idea who she was. I came to find out later that her name was Edith Villarreal, and she was the co-chair of the playwriting program at UCLA. And that's how I got into UCLA.
Yeah, so you did the work. And
I did the work.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to know. If they do the work, hard work pays off. I know that's a colloquialism that my grandmother would say, but I would say this is true. And I would even say that's how I ended up here with you tonight, thanks to Rashiki and Professor Ra. Now, you mentioned the black box, and I became familiar with Henry Box Brown when one of my friends was at USC, and she was in the film department, and she did the film Henry Box Brown. And that film went global, and she won many awards, Patricia Kayyem, on that film. I'm so happy that this story has come back up. Can you tell us about your recent experience and your recent award?
Yes, absolutely. So the name of the play is Black Box. And Black Box is what I call an epic poem with magic. and it's based on the life of Henry Box Brown. And the play was actually commissioned by the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Most people are familiar. This is the theater where Lincoln was assassinated. And so the Ford's Theater gave out, they have what's called the Lincoln Legacy Project, through which they commissioned 5 playwrights to write plays about American history. And so I was commissioned to write a play. They didn't tell me specifically what to write about. And so I decided to do some research to decide what story I might find. And I had heard about Henry Box Brown, and I knew kind of that phrase, right? Henry Box Brown shipped himself to freedom in a box. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting premise. Let me see what there is about this story. And I came to find out that Henry Box Brown had written a narrative. So I began reading the narrative, and I immediately, probably 2-3 pages in, I realized this really was a dramatic story. There are elements of storytelling that were built into the narrative that just said to me, this is the story that you're supposed to tell. Things like during his escape, essentially the box that he was in was placed in 7 different positions. Some of those positions repeated. But for me, that just said plainly, well, your story will have 7 scenes. And each of those scenes will be one of those positions. And each of those positions will reflect an aspect of Henry's life that moved Henry Box Brown towards freedom. The second thing was, I've always wanted to do a play with magic. For some reason, I've always thought, man, there should be more traditional dramatic plays where just some magical stuff happens. Yeah. And so I decided this is going to be my play with magic. And so Black Box is a play disguised as a magic show, or a magic show disguised as a play, depending on how you want to look at it. There are two characters in the story, two actors in the story. One is the magician, one is the magician's assistant. And the play begins with the Henry character being chained up on top of an escape box, a la Houdini style. But as Henry is being chained up, Henry is repeating words from Henry Box Brown's story. He's saying, I'm going to get into this box and I'm going to free myself by disappearing from this place of enslavement and reappearing somewhere else. And what happens is he gets in the box and he fails.
And what level of genius is that? Just the actual experience, like it's such a level of genius. It's beyond what we think about every day. But if people see the story and they know the story, people could free themselves. Did you learn things about magic?
So I did learn things about magic, which were the great thing about magic is that the biggest thing I learned is that we essentially create our own magic, right? We build boxes that we can use to escape. And we build those boxes, if we build them right, with the means of escaping, right? If you build a box that's not a magic box and you try to escape from it, it won't work. So whatever you frame yourself in, whatever box you put yourself in, that box has to function for you to where you want to go. You don't live in the box, right? Henry didn't move into the box.
Right.
The box, both the metaphorical box of enslavement as well as the literal box that Henry Box Brown got into, and then the magic box that I use in the play, all are representative, right, of these spaces that we live in or that we move into in order to get to where we need to go or where we want to go. And so So, you know, I learned that the metaphoric part of magic, but the literal part where it's, you know, you in order to do magic, it goes back to rewriting a script. You have to do it over and over and over and over again so that it looks seamless, right? It's misdirection. Someone's telling you, look over here while something is happening over here, right?
Yes.
So there's so many cool things that happen during the process for me of beginning with, I just want to do a play with magic, and I'm still trying to perfect my one magic trick because my goal was to get good at one. I'm not there yet, but the idea that these things that seem beyond us, these things that seem to be magical, for lack of a better word, are really what you referred to earlier. You're putting in the work to get
Yes.
better at that thing. So what happens in the play itself is we see Henry not able to escape that first time, and the rest of the play is us watching Henry get better and better and better and better and better, so that then when he gets into the box again, he's perfected this thing.
Yes.
So you should expect that it's going to work.
Well, it sounds like magic to me to be commissioned by the Ford Theater. I'm from Illinois originally, so we are all, if you know Illinois, it's the land of Lincoln.
I know.
So, and it's also the land of Obama, but being commissioned by the Ford Theater seems like magic. How does something like that come about?
I go back to putting in the work. About 2 years ago, I received a phone call from someone who said, you know, Rickerby, when you have the time, can you give me a call back? I'm calling from the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. And I thought, okay, I somewhat recognized the name. I had not met this person. I called him back. His name was Jose. And he said, listen, I just wanted to ask you if you would consider being commissioned to write a play for Ford's Theater. That's how it happened. Now, that's the magic part, right?
Right.
The work part is that Jose had seen 3 of my plays. That you know, he had seen Dreamscape, he had seen Birthmark, he had seen Blackballing. I think he had seen those 3 plays of mine. So he knew my work, and he knew that I would put in the work. So there was no application process. They were looking for playwrights nationally who had been doing the work. Pearl Clegg is another one of the playwrights who was commissioned. Charlene Woodard is another playwright who's been commissioned. So these are folks who've been putting in the work. And like I said, there was no, I guess the application process was the work I've been putting in for the past 25, 30 years.
So, well, I mean, that's wonderful. You're commissioned, and people are always worried about what to fill out on the application. And you're saying there is no application when you put in the work. That is magic. That's amazing. Can you tell us about the recent award from Cal Arts?
Yes. So I feel odd talking about these awards, right? But I appreciate it. So after receiving the commission, I was somewhat strategic about letting certain people know. So I had done a workshop with Cal Arts. For those who aren't familiar, Cal Arts is one of the premier performance, institutions in the country. And so I had done a workshop with them during the pandemic, a virtual workshop on another play of mine called Blood of Souls. And Blood of Souls is a play exploring the life of Frederick Douglass. And that's a whole other conversation. But we had workshop Blood of Souls, and when we were finishing up and I'm talking to the dean of the school, I'm thanking them and I'm saying, yeah, and I have this other play called Black Box that I was commissioned to write, and I gave that synopsis. It's an epic poem with magic, based on the life of Henry Box Brown. And Travis Preston says, "Oh, that's interesting, Kerr. We might want to workshop that through our new performance entity." And that's how. it's, you know what, even as I'm saying these things, they seem easy in a way. And I go back to the thing that we've been saying about putting in the work. Once again, I'd done a workshop with them for 3 weeks. They saw me working with their students virtually, which is not easy. And so he said, look, we want to partner with you in developing Black Box. And so that's how that came about. For 3 weeks. We worked on Black Box at CalArts. We helped to develop the story. I got to work with a magician for the first time during that process. We got to experiment with some of the other aspects of the play. And as a result of that, we ended up with the production that we just did at UC Riverside for 2 weeks that, I believe the play is in a great place. We're planning on doing performances during the month of March for, I think there are about 5,000 students who are going to be from Riverside Unified School District. The school district has bought into the play, and so they're going to be bringing 4,000 or 5,000 students to see it over the course of the month. And so all of these things are happening with, I don't want to say with a degree of ease, because it's not easy in that sense that you just do a thing and it happens, but having put in the work, having created these relationships, having been someone who has been consistent in the type of work that I do, and knowing why it is that I do what I do.
And I appreciate you sharing those qualities with us. And now I want to switch to film. I'm going to ask Brother Rashiki to play the trailer for My Name is Maisha. And we've had a pre-discussion on certain things about the film, but I would like the audience to see the trailer.
I got to make sure I share the sound.
Okay.
When worst come to worst, my people, worst come to worst, my people. The entrance to gunshot number 1.
Ever have one of those dreams where nothing comes out when you try to scream? Just so you know, this ain't gonna be one of them feel-good shows.
Brother Rashiki?
Yes.
First of all, Rickerby, if you have something to share about why film, and I want to open it up to the panel. So if people from the panel have questions.
Yes. So, I actually haven't watched My Name is Maisha in a while. So watching that trailer kind of took me back to some cool moments. When I wrote Dreamscape was intended for me to be a very small play as far as its needs. So essentially the play itself, Dreamscape, it's a 2-person play. One is a beatboxer as you heard throughout that preview, and the other is an actor playing the role of Maisha, an allusion to Taisha Miller. And so, I had been touring this play for years. We had done it, throughout the U.S. We had, won some awards. We actually had done the play in Poland. Dreamscape has been translated into 4 languages. So it's been translated into Polish and Hungarian and Spanish and Romanian. And then we did a run of the play in LA at LATC downtown. And I had the son of one of my colleagues came up to me after one of the shows, and he says, I had promised myself I was never going to do another independent film, but I have to do this as a film. And I was reluctant until Gus Krieger says to me, and I don't want to change any of the words in the play. So as a writer,
Yes.
usually when a play is being considered for transition into film, one of the first things they're looking to do is rewrite it so it's more adaptable to that medium. And so just that phrase made me more inclined to go ahead and look at doing this thing as a film. And part of it was because as a playwright, as a writer, I'm one of those playwrights who actors and directors probably don't love so much, meaning that you don't get to change my words around randomly. It takes me at least a year to write a play, to write a first draft of a play. It takes me at least 2 years for that play to be in a position where I think it's ready to go out into the world, which means that I'm very careful about every single word that I choose. You can read through any of my plays and you can ask me why I chose any word in that play, and I can tell you specifically why I chose ain't versus, is not. I can tell you why I use a contraction versus not. So that was something that was appealing to me. And then it took us about a year to, this was a very, very low budget film. We shot it out in the IE. People moved into my house for a month, which even saying those words out loud now, still, that's a thing. But we were determined to stay true to the catalyst for the play, and to stay true to the importance and the significance of this story. And then the idea that a film can reach thousands of people, to me, it still blows my mind that, I will run into people who say, yeah, Curb, I saw My Name is Maisha, or, it's available on these different platforms. That to me was something that that was not part of my trajectory, because I have always and still see myself as a playwright. So the theater is my primary space for storytelling. But when I realized, what the resonance could be with a film, it was unbelievable. And then we entered film festivals. We went to Slam Dance and we won several awards there. We everywhere the film went, nationally and internationally, it really was, people were appreciating it. And it's a very, for those who have seen it, it's a very non-traditional, it's difficult to put it into a category. At some point, it was called a musical. At some point, because it's not a traditional linear dramatic kind of storytelling. It's outside of the ordinary for film. And part of that is because it began as a play. And as a play, even as a play, it was outside of the norm. It wasn't a traditional.
Right, as someone would say, outside of the box, and then
It
you
was
have the box. It's magic.
Look at you.
Rashiki, would you like to lead the Q&A?
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent conversation so far. Excellent. Okay, so now we have a few new people on, so I'm gonna go to them first. Shamila Smith.
Shamala.
Shamala.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have a question or comment?
I I like the idea of the magic in the box. The guy who put himself in the box. I had read that story too, and that was so interesting. And it made me think we can live a disguised life. Even though people think we somebody else, we can be who we are, and we'll be disguised from them, and we don't have to be influenced by them and their narrow thinking of us. I love that idea, and it is magical thinking.
Yes.
Thank you for that. You know, as I was working on Black Box and those metaphors, and the different definitions of what a black box is, started to have resonance. Right. Once again, words are very important, and I don't choose them without thinking about them. And so I went and looked up the definition of a black box, and there are two definitions that resonated with me. And one definition is a scientific definition that essentially says a black box is a device that is prompted by the stimuli that is placed into that device, and that device just spits out that information, or spits out what's put into the box. That was one definition. The other definition of a black box is the box that you have on an airplane, right? And that box contains the vital information about what occurs when a tragedy happens. And so if you think about that kind of a box, a black box, the play as something that contains vital information when a tragedy happens, like I said, I love playing and thinking about words. And so those things would resonate with me as I was working on the play. The two things that I mentioned do not make them their way into Black Box in an overt way, but I was always conscious of those things as I was working on the play. So thank you so much. That's a great observation.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, Stephanie Williams.
Hi, Kirby.
Hey, Stephanie.
I've enjoyed the discussion tonight, and I'm certainly learning a lot from what you've shared. I'm not a playwright, as you know, but I aspire to be a writer, and a lot of the insights that you shared, I think, translate. So I'm going to tuck those away for future reference. But my question for you tonight is, I know you spoke about what inspired, or what I guess I'll say inspired, Black Box, and also what the inspiration was for the Taisha Miller story. And yet I know that you have lots of other works, important works. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little about, what personal chords tug at you when you decide to take on a particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I don't want to correct you, but you are more than an aspiring writer, because I know your work. So I'm not gonna fight you on that. So the way I decide what I'm gonna write next is usually something that that disturbs me and that I can't stop thinking about. Sometimes those things are things that come up naturally and intrinsically, such as with the Taisha Miller story, when that occurred. Sometimes those are things that come up maybe even in retrospect. So with Black Box, that I started working on that about 2 years ago. So we had gone through 2020. We had gone through 4 years previous to 2020. We had been and continue to be in the middle of all types of rhetoric that are trying to reshape the reality of the journey of Africans in this country. We are dealing with folks saying that enslavement wasn't so bad. And so for me, Black Box, in a lot of ways, is a counter to that narrative. Black Box is a story that is from the perspective of Henry Box Brown, who says at the very beginning of his narrative, my existence in slavery was not one of severity. He wasn't whipped a lot, right? And so we can just smooth over that and say he wasn't whipped a lot until you look at what a whipping was intended to do and what it did, right? The goal of whipping was to rip the skin off someone's back, right? If you look at how Frederick Douglass describes it, the way the whip was constructed. So the fact that he wasn't whipped a lot was one thing. Henry Box Brown worked and paid the person who enslaved him. Henry Box Brown was allowed to marry as much as one was allowed to marry. Henry Box Brown was allowed to have children, of course, until his wife and children were sold away. So I like what this story did because it didn't go to the extremes of enslavement, right? But even as he says in the play itself, even kind masters are evil, right? Even the kindness in enslavement is evil. And so that was something that attracted me so much to this story, that I thought, and then the use of religion, which permeates the narrative. When you see the play, or if you read Black Box, you will see that there are places throughout where Henry Box Brown says, the Methodist minister who purchased my family, the Episcopalian deacon who did such and such. He was for some reason, very specific about the use of Christianity as a means of perpetuating enslavement. And so those elements just made it, in talking about this play, it was waiting there for me to discover it. I don't even feel like I wrote it. I feel like I just discovered the play waiting in the book.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful and insightful.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. Brother E?
Yes, good evening, sir. Being a writer, how are you concerned about the AI technology?
So about 4 or 5 months ago, I went on ChatGPT and I told ChatGPT to write a one-page dialogue exchange between two characters, and I gave Chat a brief description of the characters, and in 30 seconds I had a page, and I'm like, okay, this is not too good. And I went back in and I told Chat to add this particular element and rewrite that page, and it did it in 30 seconds. I went in a third time and asked it to add another element, and by that third draft I became a little concerned, because the humanity that we bring to storytelling, and the things that we do on the page as writers is, even though it's not replicable, it's something that can be enhanced through this technology, and it's something that can be abused through this technology. And so my concern is that, in addition to, I'm a playwright, I'm also a professor who teaches writing, right? So the concern, it's a dual concern, on one end as a writer, what are the things that I still bring to the table that are vital and that are useful? And then on the other hand, I don't know if AI will replace me in 5 years or 10 years at UCR. But it's a viable conversation. I don't have any really profound answers to that question because I haven't spent enough time in that space. But I do believe that if we look at AI as a tool, right? If we look at it as a tool for storytelling, the same way we went from writing by hand, although I still write everything out longhand, to writing on typewriters, to writing on a computer, to now being able to essentially speak your dialogue and your action and those types of things. If we look at it as a tool for still telling those stories of human beings and of humanity, I think it can be something that's viable and that is a positive addition to what we do. If it's taken and it's abused in a way that the recent Hollywood writer's strike, I think was looking to address, which is instead of having a writer's room full of human beings, 10 people working on a series, maybe we'll have 2 people and an AI, and they can do the same job. So that's the cynical part of me looking at it, as well as the practical part of me looking at it as well. So that's where I am with it at this point. I imagine in 6 months, I may be in a different place, definitely in a year. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Brother Doctor?
Yeah, a few more questions. Let's go back here to the movie.
Yes.
My first question, and I play homage to the beatbox guys, man, Biz Marquis and the human beatbox, man. I'm glad you did that because that's my era.
Yes.
And that's going to be the question. Because we had on the show before, we had guys come on, talk about today's rap and the rap videos. You got these, and I just know the name Megan the Stallion and
yes,
all these other, and how these videos are like X-rated.
Yes.
How would you have written that movie today using rap? Because of how it is now. How would it have been written? Because the beatbox wouldn't have been, nobody would have probably understood that if you do it today.
This is a great question because it addresses the evolution of this genre of entertainment, of storytelling. I've always looked at it as a means of storytelling. And I'll use a parallel. Years ago, I wrote or I created a play called Buck World 1. And Buck World 1 is a play that uses crump dancing, spoken word, and video projections as a means of storytelling. And the reason I chose crump dancing, there was a movie years ago called Rise that explored this form of dance. And it's a very dynamic, dramatic form of dance with bursts of energy. And the reason I chose that as a means of storytelling was because I had been to a few crump sessions and I had watched these dancers telling stories with their bodies. Not only telling stories with their bodies, but taking their bodies and doing things that were unexpected as far as the types of positions they would land in and the types of ways that they would move. And so I saw crump dancing as a means of storytelling. And I'm saying storytelling a lot because ultimately playwriting, screenwriting boils down to someone saying, yo, let me tell you a really interesting story. And after an hour and a half, you'll be like, yo, that was very interesting. I love the way you told it, the ways that you use these things. So whenever I work on a play or a screenplay, I go back to that basic thing. Yo, check this out. Check this thing that happened. And so I'm not even sure if I would if I would look at see, y'all gonna mess with me now because that's crump. I'm telling you, it's storytelling. There's nothing like a crump session with that energy and those things that these young folks do as far as storytelling. But I think what I would have to do with the current state of hip hop music is I would have to find artists who are doing things that are not part of the prevalent commercial hip hop space. I would find people like Lupe Fiasco, who has a song called Little Weapons. And in the song Little Weapons, Lupe goes through 3 or 4 scenarios in which young people are weaponized in different ways. And you know, how someone who goes and shoots up a place, or someone who, you know, is selling drugs, or someone who is doing something even on an international level, child soldiers, are being used in a particular way. But Lupe is rhyming, Lupe is telling the story, the production is dope, and all of those aspects of that hip hop era that, you know, we kind of yearn for after we start getting a little gray, are present in that space. So what I would end up doing, because within hip hop culture, there have always been these different strains ongoing. There have always been different strains of hip hop, even from those days when, you know, you had KRS-One and Boogie Down Production and Queen Latifah and, you know, all these different folks who were talking about positivity. You know, you had some booty shaking, right? You know, you had the 2 Live Crew, you had different elements that were part of that strain. I think what has happened now is those other strains are so obliterated, they're so obfuscated, they're so hidden by the prevalent strain that it feels like the whole thing is just one big, you know, booty shake, and it's not. It's not.
Yeah, because you know the scene you did when she went to the club for the guy came to him, hey, we're gonna put you in a rap movie, blah blah blah. They went to the club. I said, oh man, I hope you don't do this stuff like they doing now. And it was nice, man. It was nice. And I'm glad you said the thing about the chosen words, because I was watching it and it was some dialogue, some lines. I'm like, well, okay, something like, and I can't remember. I know one I remember. The uncle. I love the uncle, man. When the uncle, when she's helping him with the furniture, he's telling her, you wouldn't have made a slave. You know, and the way that line, it was something, I thought, okay, you misspoke something and said something wrong, but you said chosen words. Now I get it. So you said that, because the way he said it, I was like, wait a minute, you wouldn't have made it as not a slave. Something, he said something right in there, and it didn't sound right, but I knew he was saying.
So here's a beauty of you choosing that particular line of dialogue to address as word choices. The line of dialogue is, you would have never made it as no slave.
Correct. That's it.
Right?
That's it.
So here's what happened. On the day that scene was being shot, I wasn't on set. And I didn't get on set until the end of the day. And they were shooting the scene, and I sat in on the scene, and I remember the actor saying, you would have never made it as a slave. And I pulled the director aside and I said, listen, the line of dialogue has to say, you would have never made it as no slave. That's what it has to say. This is not a conversation. It's not a debate. That's what the line of dialogue has to say. So I hope you have some takes where he's saying it that way. And the reason for that was because in my growing up, that exchange, that is how that exchange happened, right? It was the colloquialism. It was the rhythm of how it was said. It was the both the humor involved with it, as well as the subliminal indictment, as well as, you know, that parental, that uncle, that aunt, that mom saying, you know, you saw, you know, you would have never made it as no slave. And so if it's not done correctly, then it could go into that place, right? Just like you mentioned with the club scene. Oh, we're gonna have a booty shaking club scene. And, you know, once you know my work, your next sentence would be, nah, that ain't gonna happen, because this is Rickerby Hinds and he don't do that. And you would be right, because I don't do that. Every single play I will ever put in front of you, everything that happens will happen for a reason, and that reason will always be to elevate. And if you watch 30 seconds of the scene, you would be like, oh, I'm offended because he just said you would have never made it as no slave. If you watch the rest of the scene, you will get the point that I'm trying to make.
Sure did, man. You nailed it, Rob. You
Thank
nailed
you
it,
for
man.
that, though.
Because it stuck out. And I'm thinking, let me replay this. He said it. It stuck out, man. So you did something right because it stuck out with me.
Appreciate that, brother.
And one other question,
Brother
I don't want to
Doctor.
go on too long because I got 1,000 questions, man.
Brother Doctor, let's
know.
get to Professor Ron.
Go ahead, man. Come back if we got time, man, because I got a couple more, man.
Okay, Professor Ron, we get back to you. Professor Ron.
Yeah. Abani Ghani, everyone. Appreciate what's been said, if I understand it correctly. And I really want to compliment you and Sister Randolph for y'all work and coordinating with each other. And it's a real deep challenge to put things on paper.
Yes.
Even though we can go all the way back to Freedom Ways and the history of the Black newspapers, we had writers.
Yes.
Plays. Are you teach undergrad or grad?
I teach both. So primarily I teach graduate students, but I also teach undergraduates, playwriting, and I teach a class on hip hop theater as well.
Okay. Now, because see, we had a lot of good Black play theaters out here at one time.
Yes.
Ebo Theater, I think it was, and the Ebony Theater. And,
yeah.
All of those historical places, and a lot of churches put on plays. The Nation of Islam had one, and so when it comes down to the challenge of getting a play into the movies, because Anthony Anderson started out doing plays at Compton College. And so then he matriculated into stardom and things of this nature.
Yes.
But at the same time, the challenge is getting it. Well, some people want to write crossover plays,
right?
But then there are other people that just want a play to the people or speak about a specific incident, like you said, Tasha Miller death and things of that nature, and it bothers you, and you just want to use your pen to make a message to amplify that issue.
Yes.
From that standpoint, my point is that at UC Riverside, do you put on plays on campus?
I do, and I also put on plays in the community.
Okay, so you do both.
Yes, and that's always been since I've been both a student at UCR as well as a professor. I've had one foot in on the campus and one foot in the community throughout that time.
In your style of writing, how do you maintain originality?
Yes. I think for me,
or your style, that they say, oh, that's you,
Yes. Yes. For me, I think it is sticking to that original thing that got me into writing for the stage, and that was telling stories in a style, with a rhythm, with a feel that would bring my friends and my family and my community to the theater. So when people would ask me, who do you write for? I would always say, I write for my community, I write for my friends, and then I would finish it up with saying, I write for people who don't go to the theater.
Mm.
So I don't and what I mean by that is I don't write down. I don't dump. If you see my work, none of it is. I'm not writing going, oh, this person doesn't go to the theater, so I need to say this way. Mm. What I mean by that is I don't write in a way that is jokes or nuances that someone who has been to 100 plays would get. Someone who has seen these. I write for myself who didn't see very many plays. Before I started writing plays, I might have seen 5 plays at the most, but I did go to church, right? So I saw the dramatic structure of a service that was put together properly. I saw, the journey of a concert, getting to see someone like Tremaine Hawkins in concert, or getting to see, the what was the name of the choir, the Watts singers, I forget the name, but getting to see a narrative, right? As I mentioned, singing in the choir and understanding how that works. That's where I come from with my storytelling. My storytelling doesn't originate in the theater. It originates in the community. It originates with me standing around at Manual Arts High School on a Saturday night during church basketball games, outside watching Tony breakdance with a boombox and looking at this person telling me a story with only their body. So that's where my storytelling comes from, and that's where it remains. No matter how long I've been on campus at a university, no matter how many conferences or how much traveling I'm doing, the storytelling always goes back to me and my boys sitting around, at 12 midnight, talking about stuff, telling stories, wondering if we're going to go to the club and who we're going to try to connect with, pledging a fraternity, doing all. That's where my storytelling comes from.
It's a challenge when you're a professor and you got papers to grade, you got lectures to prepare and things of this nature. And then, sometimes you just walk like, I think Miss Randolph may have said it, you just see something and and it comes to you.
Yes.
Because I see your passion for writing. I can feel your passion for writing.
Thank you.
And we do need things that can speak to people that don't read, don't read newspapers or things of this nature, but they like to go out and then they sit and hear your play, then all of a sudden they like turn on like Doc.
Yes.
Doc lights on, it's burning, so
yes.
1,000 watts.
My dream has been for someone to go, yo, what you doing this weekend? And it's like, well, Friday night I'm going to the club, but Saturday night I'm going to go check out one of Curve's plays. Like that for me is the dream.
That's the challenge at UC in Riverside. I've got no more than about 17% Black people out there now.
Yes,
that many, and so the audience, is going to be. You have to have people that will come.
Yes.
From the outside. But you do have Moreno Valley and, Corona and all of them right around in there.
Yeah.
But the point is that, people like to go to plays because it's different.
Yes.
It's different than going to the movies with all the stuff they put in the movie.
Yeah.
Then you be one how this person flying and all that type of stuff. But when you have a play, it's more realistic. And dealing with Tasha Miller and dealing with the Black Box, I see your consciousness that you're directing this to communicate to Black people,
yes,
into a certain way. Even though you accept all of us, I'm pretty sure you're in general when you see everybody, you got to accept everybody.
Yeah.
But the point is that that's a beautiful thing, and I want to compliment you on that. And say just keep up the work, and hopefully that you have a play that we can go see locally out here, or something like that, or you get a good sponsor take it on the road or whatever it is, or somebody say, hey, look, could you bring your play to, watch Compton or something?
Well, listen, bro, and thank you so much for that. And usually when someone says that, I will follow up with, we're here right now, let's begin that conversation. That's how I ended up in Poland. That's how I ended up in Romania, is saying, how do we bring, my play Dreamscape was just done in Germany 2 weeks ago. 2 months ago. And so it begins with this conversation, because with my work, you're right. It needs to move. It needs to go to places versus being in a designated place and drawing the people there. So the way I got tenure was by touring my work. You mentioned the type of work that I do. Had I written my plays and sent them out to theaters throughout the country and hoped that I got productions, we would be having a very different conversation about, where I'm teaching. But I realized that wasn't going to happen. So the step that I took was, I will write and I will direct my work and I will produce it and I will put it in front of people, and the work will speak for itself. And this is what I always say whenever I go and I lecture or I speak. I will usually say, look, I'm mildly interesting talking, but my work is way more interesting than me. I will put my play up anywhere. We'll bring Black Box, we'll bring Dreamscape, and I guarantee you come and sit through the play and you'll go, yeah, that is way more interesting than Curb. But yes, thank you for that, because there is the practical matter, right? Of you create the work, you do the work. Now, how do we let the world see the work? And Dr. Randolph mentioned, I was asked about why doing a movie, right? Moving in that direction. And it's not the direction, I'm not moving towards movie making, but I understand the medium. I understand the fact that this program can now be seen by 500, 1,000, 10,000 people without us having to do it live again. And so I'm understanding that.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I appreciate the elder being here to say that, because when you say theater, bring it here, I want to say, Professor Raw, I will bring it. So let's talk about a designated place and space, and let's do it.
Yeah, and the promotion and the advertisement and the target audience is the thing.
Listen, we got both of them. Dreamscape is just sitting there waiting. Both of my actors live in LA, so they keep going, Curb, we have to do a run of Dreamscape in LA.
So
okay.
Yeah, we can talk.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Number, because the issue is, again, how many actors and the issues in putting on the play, and charging people.
Thank you, Kirby.
Yeah. So go ahead, Rashida, Doctor, have the rest of my time. I yield.
Thank you so much.
Some ideas by Brother Hinds.
Yes.
We got two podcasts here. We got the Conscious Corner and the CEN show. And the base of these shows is self and collective improvement.
Yes, sir.
So I'm throwing some ideas out there.
Yes, sir.
But I wanted to ask you something. Now, you got a chance to meet Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing.
Yes.
So tell me your thoughts about her, because she was very dear to me.
Because of Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing, I wrote a play called Black Ballin'. And Black Ballin' was a play that I wrote when I was a student at UCLA. It was actually the play that I wrote my first year at UCLA. And Black Ballin' explored race using sports as a metaphor. And so in Black Ballin', I explored baseball, basketball, football, and boxing. And I looked at issues within those sports that transcended the sport and bled into the larger society, such as 3 strikes and you're out. And so in Black Ballin', a batter comes up to the plate, he swings, and the umpire calls strike 2 on him. And he ends up arguing with the umpire, why do I have 2 strikes? I just came up to the plate. And after arguing for a while, Negro League players appear to him, the ghosts of these players, of Satchel Paige and of these other Negro League players. And they explain to him that the reason you have 2 strikes is because you were born with strike 1. Mm-hmm. And so this play was written at the tail end or during the 3 strikes laws that were in California, right? And it explored sports and race in a very different way. So it's so funny you mentioned this because I mentioned Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing yesterday in my graduate playwriting class, and the theory of color confrontation and how sports are used as a means of reinforcing the mores of a society. And I mean, we can have a whole different conversation and show about these things, right? That she brought up. When you're playing pool and you win once you knock all of the other colored balls off the table, and the last ball that you have to knock off the table is the black ball, right? It's the 8 ball, and the one ball that's left on the table is the white ball. So so I say all that to say, yes, all of those foundational things that I learned, the people who came and spoke. The people who I went to see speak, we were involved with the divestment movement from South Africa when I was an undergraduate student, leading demonstrations, meeting students from South Africa, learning the toy, all these different things that were embedded, in the bones, so that when I sit down to write, that's what I'm pulling from. So yes, bro, we can, that's a whole conversation that we can have.
Education is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay, brother doctor, back to you.
Hey, let me ask you, your series Redacted. Now, is those your students that did that series?
Those were some of my students, yes. Man, you put in some work. Redacted is a group of students who graduated from UCR and wanted to go into filmmaking, and I became their supporter in multiple ways, both investing into their production, but also I have a space called Riverside Studios, which is a community-based filmmaking space that I'm collaborating now with the city of Riverside on. And the goal for that space is to allow for anyone in the community, and that's the community at large, to be able to come into the space, say, listen, I have an idea for a film, I have an idea for a play. And for us to be able to provide the space, the knowledge, as well as financing to some degree, so that those things can be brought to fruition. Because after 21 years of teaching and, educating these students, and after 4 years or 5 years saying to them, hey, there you go, good luck, see you around the way, just didn't feel right to me. So I've been, for the past 4 years, really working to provide the kind of space and support so that the issue of money does not become the means of not having something happen. So even when I look at my own work, I'm applying for grants. I'm receiving support so that if someone says, yo, we want to do Dreamscape, however, we can't afford to do whatever, pay the actors or do this, I can say, don't worry about it. Get me an audience and a space and we'll do it. And that's what the recent trip to Germany, they said, we'd love to bring you to Germany. We can provide you with an audience, with housing, but we'll need you to get here. I'm like, okay. That's so for me, the elimination of money as the means of impeding progress is my current present goal. And I am doggedly pursuing that. So, we don't let money be the thing that stops us from making progress on these things.
Yeah, in my last, yeah, man, like I said, the Maisha thing, man, the last, like I told you before we started, the ending, man, very touching, man.
Yes.
When we did, I talked about it earlier. I don't want to give too much of the movie away, man, but when you got to that last part,
yeah,
it was just quiet in the house, man. Watching, the little video, it was, I almost brought it to a tear to me, man.
I appreciate that.
Excellent.
I appreciate that so much.
Excellent, man. And the way you just now, was it like a whole flash? Because from the time the cops got there, it seemed like her whole life flashed for her eyes.
Yes.
You go back until she was shot. Was that kind of like what we're looking at?
That's what we're trying to, that's what we're trying to impress. The premise for me behind Dreamscape and My Name is Maisha is this. The story is taking place in the amount of time that it took for 4 officers to shoot her 12 times. So it's that, that long. And so these are, the way I wrote it was, if I was being shot 12 times, what might be going through my mind as these things were happening as a 19-year-old young woman in that situation? And that's what created the scenes. That's what created each moment in the story. And so the idea is the compression of time, expanding it into an hour and 15 minutes. And then once again, compressing it again at the end.
It worked. Yeah, so I saw it worked, man. It was great.
So appreciate it,
man. Hope you come out with another one, another story, or come out with a book. I'm not a go to a play, kind of person. More like a watch it on TV or read a book. But I hope you can come out with a book about your life or some stories you can put down there. I can sit and read, and you come back on the show, and I can question you about that stuff. Man.
You know what? Thank you. I've considered it, and then I always go back to, is this my medium? But yeah, I am working on an idea for something that resembles a book. It's actually currently working on it. It's called The Last Play by Hinds, and it's essentially a way of me looking at me and what I do and why I do it as a play and as a visual as well as a book thing. So I'm saying it out loud here. Now it's recorded, so now I'm gonna actually have to do it. But I'm working on it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brother Doctor. Okay, Dr. Randolph, back to you.
Well, I know we've been here a while. I don't want to keep our guests any further, but I certainly appreciate you having us on this evening. And the last thing I would like to say, if he could just share some information on Blood of Souls, because in 5th grade, the person that I chose to write about for my history project was Frederick Douglass. Wow. And that was it. His life was I was so impressed with him as a person in 5th grade. And I believe I was the only Black person in class at the time. And I thought, for history, I'm choosing Frederick Douglass and no one can stop me.
Yes.
And you have Blood of Souls. If you could share some information about that, I'm glad that the doctor brought up so you could answer with the Riverside Studios. There's so much we could go on and on. But again, I want to thank Professor Raw for even having the idea to bring you to LA to do a play. I want to be a part of that production and how it moves forward. But just please share something before we go tonight about Blood of Souls.
Absolutely. So the title of the play, based on the life of Frederick Douglass, actually based on the first 21 years of Frederick Douglass's life until Frederick Douglass freed himself. The title of the play is called Blood of Souls, and it is because when Frederick Douglass would tour Europe after he freed himself, what he would say, or what was said, was that the wealth of the Americans was built on the blood of the souls of African slaves. So that's the reason for the name of the play. And Blood of Souls is based on the life of Frederick Douglass, and it's a play that uses rhythm, movement in the telling of the story. There are five bodies on stage, and each of those 5 bodies represents an aspect of the life of Frederick Douglass. So we have the young Frederick Douglass, we have the classic Frederick Douglass that we're all more familiar with. We have, the Frederick Douglass who was in his 20s, who was buff and who was a fighter. He fought a lot. And so through Frederick Douglass's words, through the rhythms of hip hop. So it's not a rap play. It uses the rhythms of hip hop music in order to tell the story. We explore his life up until Frederick Douglass freed himself. There are places in the play where I use the rhythms of, there's a song by DMX called Who We Be. And there's this beat, it goes, did it, did it, did it, did it, did it. And it's a list of all these different things, right, in the song. In the song, in Blood of Souls, that list that we hear the beating, the choking, the cutting. We hear all the multiple ways in which folks who were enslaved were abused. And we're using that rhythm to create the space for you to be able to hear and to feel and to empathize and to go on the journey that I'm taking you on with Blood of Souls. So it's a play that it's written. It's very ambitious because in addition to the words and the lyrics and the movement, there's also each of the 5 characters has a rope, and this rope magically or automatically wraps around their wrists when they're not using it. But this rope becomes a whip. This rope becomes a means of storytelling. The rope becomes a narrative tool for us to explore enslavement through the life of Frederick Douglass. And so, yeah, I haven't talked about Blood of Souls for a while. Thank you for asking that question. That's man. Now I'm gonna go back and revisit it and start messing up my plans for the next year.
No.
But William Marshall played a one-man Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was excellent. We had him out here in Compton a couple of times.
Yeah. Listen, the life of that. Oh man. Yeah. No, we can go into it, but thank you for that question. I have not talked about Blood of Souls for a while, so I appreciate it so much.
Yes, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you again for being with us this evening. Rashiki, thank you for inviting me, and we can close it out. I appreciate everyone that came on tonight.
Likewise, I ditto that. Excellent show. Everybody participated well, and can't ask for a better show than this. Okay, so next week, we have this young brother coming on. His name is Noble Carlos, and I'm going to interview with him. So that should be very interesting. Then Professor Rod, what do we have next week?
Oh, I'll call you.
Okay. All right. So I appreciate
I like roundtable discussions.
Okay.
And different topics. There's so much going on.
Yes.
And and participatory discussions where the people express their thoughts and their vision, and then we sum it up at the end.
Okay.
We have so many diverse ideas, man. So
that's correct.
Good.
So now this is open to the public. Go to communityeducationnetwork.com and you'll see the guests and the shows every week. We're here every week, open to the public. So each one teach one in Conscious Corner. Everybody have a good evening.